Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined by Dayton Reimer and Peter Baracchini. We also got a few guests here to do our annual Scouting Combine recap reaction. Got Mark Scheig and Chris Babos. We also are going to get Andrew Forbes here at some point. But welcome, guys. Thanks for coming on.
Always great to join you, Matt.
Sure. Pleasure to be back from Buffalo. It was a great experience up there.
For sure. And Chris, you were on our playoff preview show for the Washington Capitals, so you guys have recognized him. He's from there, but he was also at the Scouting Combine in place of Peter, who usually goes, but we have another great writer there. So lots of fun stuff that came out of that, and we're going to talk about it. First, let's just go over some just takeaways from the Combine itself. And I'll start with you, Chris, since you're the newcomer to that. What kind of takeaways did you come away from it over the 2 days you were there? There's like fitness testing, interviews, whole bunch of fun stuff there. Some of the takeaways from that over the 2 days.
Every one of the athletes there absolutely loved the VO2 max test, as you can imagine. It was one of my favorite people, and I'm sure Mark would agree with me, are the I would assume athletic trainers that are barking at those players on the bikes, trying to get the most out of them. As you're going back and transcribing interviews, you just hear "go, drive, move" just through the back of just about every interview that you've done at the Combine. But it was an awesome experience to be able to see how meticulous the NHL really is, with the height and weight testing, with the agility tests, and just everything. You get a lot of good numbers and a good chance to get to know these players, at least on a different level. You're going to get your generalized answers, but if you guys gave some good questions out there, you got some good answers. And that was one of the biggest takeaways that I've had outside of the top six after Schaefer. You could tell me what's going to happen, because I really have no clue after the draft combine.
For sure. I mean, it is a lot of we're probably going to see the top five we've been talking about throughout. It's going to get a bit uncertain after that, for sure. Mark, I'll go to you next. You're a veteran of the Scouting Combine. You've been there for so many years. What kind of takeaways did you get from this year's edition?
Just a segue off of what Chris said, on the mock drafts, if you have them, crumple up your piece of paper, set it on fire, and throw it straight into the trash can, because you're going to have a better chance at that than trying to figure out how the top five is going to go. Schaefer seems pretty safe at number one. He was just outstanding. I mean, he shared the story that he chose to go to the Grief Center to visit with people rather than to go to his own graduation. So, I mean, not only are you getting a great person, you're getting a future captain. He's a great player. He only needed 17 games to show what he can do. If he doesn't go number one, it would be completely stunning. Beyond that, though, good luck. We think Michael Misa will go second to the Sharks, but the Sharks, we know, value Matthew Schaefer, and there's always a chance of a trade. The Blackhawks are like Fort Knox. You have no idea what they're thinking. Utah wants to shake up the draft, so that's really the big takeaway here, is the top of the draft is very unpredictable. There could be huge trades. It's just a matter of, are they going to bring anybody in for some late interviews? Are there some trade possibilities that come up? But that's what's going to be the fascinating part of all of this, is just how exactly our 2 through 5 and everything else after are going to shake out.
Yeah, I mean, the order is probably going to be a little different for sure. I mean, once you're going from, one, like you say, Matthew Schaefer is probably going to be going to the Islanders, even though there's been, the talk about James Hagen's going there because he's from there. He said he wants to go there, but the Islanders are probably going to be picking Matthew Schaefer. That's probably pretty sure. Andrew, you just popped in there. Any takeaways from the Scouting Combine? I know you're a veteran of the event as well. You've been there multiple times, but there's always something new with the different prospects that you got. What did you take away from this time?
Well, for starters, I'm feeling older and older every time I go, I think. So it's, definitely a long day, as Chris found out and Mark knows of. And Peter, obviously, you've been there as well. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of, like you said, I just kind of tuned in here and, just hearing the tail end of Mark there, it's very, there's a lot of unknowns in this draft. And there's a lot of things that are going to shake up over the next couple of weeks leading into it. Um, Matt, you said it. It's not going to be the same lineup that we're going to see right now that we're going to see draft day, and there's going to be trades that are made. There's a lot of off-season questions for a lot of teams, including the Maple Leafs with Marner, and there's potential. They talked to Brady Martin, and the fact that the Leafs are talking to Brady Martin tells me that there's a potential chance that they could move up, right? Or that they're interested in moving up, and there's so many options for teams right now to make moves, and there's teams with so much cap space, and with the cap going up, this is going to be one of the more wild off seasons we've seen in a long time. And I think even when talking to the prospects there this past weekend, you kind of get a feeling that there's a lot of uncertainty among them as well. Whereas in past years, you've had guys who said, yeah, this interview was probably the smoothest, the best one I had versus some of the other ones. A lot of the guys were saying, yeah, I met with 26 teams and all of them went fairly well. And so I think they're kind of, there's a lot of unknowns for them as well this season. And I think that's what's going to make the next couple of weeks very exciting to watch.
Yeah, and also because the draft is centralized, right? The GMs aren't going to all be in one room this time. And the combine, they were all there. So it's like, well, most of them, some of them weren't. But I mean, you're looking at, they could get some deals kind of going. So we'll see where it all shakes out in the next couple weeks before the draft. And then, of course, before free agency kicks in. Peter, I'll go to you. I mean, you weren't there. Dayton wasn't either. Of course, I wasn't. But I mean, Twitter, social media, a whole bunch of stuff. We had everyone, Andrew, Chris, and Mark were all tweeting stuff throughout the 2 days. So what did you take away from this time at the Combine?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I try to tune into, Mark, Andrew, and Chris as best as possible. For me, I again, the big thing is the unpredictability. I think Schaefer is a foregone conclusion. He is number one, and we kind of thought that maybe it would kind of be a Hagens Martone a Misa Hagens Martone combination of those three going next. But even then, there's no certainty that that's going to happen. I'm seeing like mocks even before the Combine that Hagens dropping past number 5. Is that something that teams are not necessarily going to regret on doing because he's got such high skill, IQ, and potential that maybe teams are going to prioritize the, competitive side, those intangibles that guys like Brady Martin, Caleb Desnoyers, or even Porter Martone can bring ahead of that at this point, where, Desnoyers, for basically the last 2 years, all he's done is just win. No matter what level he's at, no matter what tournament he's at, is he going to squeak into the top 3 or even top 5 or top 3? Brady Martin, I think, was not necessarily the biggest surprise, but it's one that makes sense where he's meeting teams from that 4 to 7 range. Mark mentioned that Utah wants to shake things up. Nothing bigger than taking a guy that, is a very competitive, physical, two-way centerman within that top 5. Again, he's shown that he can win. He's got that potential. Then again, he's met with Boston, Philadelphia, Utah, teams that kind of fits the bill of him being that type of player and having a perfect fit with those organizations. So that to me was really strong. Again, I think the other thing was, getting the sense, and Andrew, you wrote a great piece on this about the CHL NCAA route with players, getting that feeling out process. Some have, got those scholarships. Some haven't really made that commitment yet. They're still weighing all their options. Is this going to be a loyalty kind of thing? I know one prospect mentioned that loyalty was going to be a big thing. I can't remember if it was Ben Kindle or somebody else. If someone could correct me on that, but are teams going to be a little bit more loyal to their junior team, or are they going to take that next step and be a little bit more competitive and face tougher competition at the NCAA route? So those to me were the biggest standouts, or, the biggest question marks, or some of the prospects have answered during the Combine.
Sure. And Dayton, finishing it off, any takeaways that you got throughout the 2 days, just from what you heard?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of kind of what has already been said, and I'm really sad to have to inform a bunch of our writers that we can't use our writers mock draft anymore because Mark said we have to throw it away. It's all garbage. Yeah, that'll be coming out in the next few days, and even just seeing that experience and comparing that to what I've seen at the combine, like it's wide open. Like we've all been saying here, it's you don't know. Pretty much after first, things could happen. Like it's such a close draft class in terms of skill and talent, and like it kind of comes down to preference, right? Does this person have this skill that we want, or does this person have the size that we want? And it's really splitting hairs. So yeah, seeing all the prospects say they interviewed with 27, 28, 29 teams, I didn't see anybody lower than that. So that's I find very interesting and will be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, that's going to be fun to see because sometimes you can get where I think one draft we were like, yeah, top 10, we're pretty much sure who's going to be in that top 10. This time, probably the top 5, we'll be pretty sure. Maybe not the order, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where everyone goes in that first round. All right, let's talk about some prospects that stood out. I know you mentioned Brady Martin, Peter, already. That name's come up. I'll start with you, Andrew. Any prospects that really stood out to you throughout the 2 days that you were there?
Yeah, I would say one guy, and I just ranked him number 3 in my final rankings. I know Peter had him in the same spot as Caleb Desnoyers. He's a self-proclaimed competitive player, hard worker, a guy that wants to play in the dirty areas, and he's got the talent to go along with it. He really impressed me, and I know this is going to sound crazy, but like I knew how good Matthew Schaefer was on the ice. The chance to actually get to speak to him and hear him talk, and just I posted a video of our conversation with him during the scrum, and when he was asked about when he went to the grief center, and that to me, just like this guy's going to be a leader in this league, and it's gonna, what he does on the ice is going to match what he does off the ice, and I think that if he does in fact go first overall, which I think a lot of us can agree that he's gonna, New York's gonna love having a guy like that on their team, and he's a future leader, he's a future captain in this league, and I think there's no doubt. Some of the other guys that I was kind of hooked on, Anton Frundell. There was another Swede that came out and called him, I believe it was Arvid Drott, called him generational. Mm-hmm. And so I asked Frundell, I said, like the word generational isn't often used to describe prospects, and it was used to describe you by a fellow prospect. And his response was, I just want to do well in each and every game. I don't focus on what I can do in the broader picture, but I want to be the best in every single game that I play. So I take it night by night. I take it period by period. I play each game as an individual game. If I can be generational in that game, that's great. But otherwise, that term means nothing to me. And that to me, because this is a guy that's slid down some boards, that to me was a guy that is ready to take this league by storm. And I think a lot of people have him more underrated than they think. And that I'm interested to see where he goes, and when he makes it to the NHL, how he's going to take this league by storm.
Yeah, he's a very skilled guy, and he's a very good two-way guy too, which is, I mean, he could enter the league a lot sooner than some other guys. So yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. Mark, I'll go to you next. Who did you find stand out the most over the 2 days to you?
Yeah, Andrew just mentioned Frundell. I'll just add that, speaking of potentials at number 3 for the Blackhawks, possibly low-key look out for that. If they think that Connor Bedard and Frank Nazar aren't the 1-2 down the middle, Frundell would fit like a glove there. Mm-hmm. It's something to watch here. It's 2 other guys, though. Roger McQueen, very interested to see how his fitness went. All indications were that he did well. He was able to complete stuff. He's 6'5" up to 198 pounds now. I think he might slip a little bit because, case study from last year, Caden Lindstrom and his back situation went 4th overall. Teams are naturally going to be a little worried about how that might go, but someone's going to roll the dice and probably get a really good player if he slips too far. And then the other guy who really stood out, set a combine record for the long jump. I'm not sure if you guys happen to see that in passing or not. William Horkoff, though, son of Sean, 6'5", over 200 pounds. If you're a team later in the first round, maybe even early second, and you're looking for a center with some upside, that's the place to look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a big guy, and had to set a record for sure. That's huge, and good hockey bloodlines, of course. Sean Horkoff was really, I don't know if a high end NHLer, but he was really good for the Oilers for a while there, and ended up, I think he played for Dallas too, right? From what I remember.
So
yeah. So he's it was a guy that very good two-way forward too, and. I don't know if he was that big though. But his son sure is. Chris, I'll go to you next. Who did you find stand out to you?
I'm going to actually piggyback on both Andrew and Mark on that one. The first one was Frondell. He had talked about. It's not that he had talked about. Everybody that watches highlights knows his shooting, knows the cannon that he has for a one-timer. One of the things that you could tell he's most proud of is that he's really good at deflections as well. One of the other players that was at the draft, I forget who it was, I tweeted out about it, but went around saying that he's a juggler. So he works on his hand-eye coordination all of the time, which could end up being a really big boon at the NHL level, especially if you can find a way to get him in front of the net. And use a frame and be able to tip and get those kind of deflections. That could be a real big opportunity for him to get some goals at the NHL level. And just when he was asked about it, it's something that is fairly accessible in Sweden. So he just ended up picking it up, and has continued the process of including that. On Thursday, Mark and I had the chance. They had 6 players from the top 10 go in and talk in pairs, essentially. And Victor Eklund absolutely crushed that 10-minute interview. His personality absolutely shone through. He made some jokes, and it was just one of those things that, like, he seemed to me to be the most comfortable up there in just being there. I don't know if it's going to happen because of just how talented they both are. I would love to see some franchise push their chips in the table and get both of these Swedes on the same team, because even during testing Saturday, they went at the same time so that they could push each other to try to drive and do better. So it was one of the things that I took away. If it's possible, that could end up being a really smart decision for some franchise. And then the other one that really surprised me was Simon Wong. He's looking to become the second Chinese born player to sign an NHL contract. Kevin He from Winnipeg was the first. I believe that was last year. And as a player that didn't move to Toronto until he was 12, and then learning the Canadian style of hockey and that whole system, I just think he has a lot more upside. He's got a lot more learning to do, and as a big defenseman, I think that has a pretty the potential is there for him to continue to grow and learn, which I don't think you see as much at in that second and third round, because generally speaking, these players have been playing for 8-10 years at that point. So he's still early in his development. I'm excited to see where he ends up going, and if he gets put in the right situation, he'll be a player to watch out for.
Yeah, he's one that I've been keeping an eye on for sure. So we'll see where he goes. Potentially maybe towards the end of the second round. We'll see.
That's about where where most of the conversations I had was in that 2-3 range.
Sure. All right, Dayton, what about you for prospects that stood out over the combine that you kind of saw?
Yeah, I think, I didn't do a lot of interviews, but William Horkoff, his testing, that jump, setting that record, like that's significant. Especially for a big kid, high end athleticism. That's teams are going to notice that, right? So that's going to be a big one. And then one that I also sort of noticed was Cam Schmidt leading. Well, where is it here now? In the bench press, the 50% body weight power. So he led that, and he is 5'7.5", according to Mark's measurements. So that's, I hope that would result in a bigger, target on him for NHL teams. He's maybe undersized, but he has a lot of power that he's bringing, and I think we saw that in his game at the under 18s and with the Vancouver Giants. I like it when the little guys succeed, and I hope that translates to a high pick.
Sure, I still think he's going in the second round, and that's where. But I mean, and it'd be great if the Canucks could pick him around that range, because they do have a second round pick this year. So we'll see. But they don't seem very good getting these smaller guys. I don't know. Maybe a Connor Garland can petition for him, because he's a lot like him. So we'll see. All right, Peter, finish with you. Anyone that really stood out over the two days in the scouting combine, or even the week, that would kind of coming out from there?
Yeah, again, piggyback off everybody. Horkoff, I think that not just because of his testing alone and setting that long jump record, but what his interviews or some of the comments that I saw about him, prioritizing winning and doing everything right on the ice. That is going to sit well with a lot of teams. And I think that, a lot of teams or a lot of rankings have him within that mid second round, around that 50 to, or, 45 to 55 range, in that mid portion of the draft, maybe even just a tad bit later. I wonder if there's going to be a team that's going to take a swing on him in that first round. I really think that because of that attitude, because of the mindset, because of the strength, I think he's going to be one surprise that could jump into the first round. Overall, I think that some of the other names too that really stood out in terms of their testing and even really put themselves on the map. I think there are some first rounders that really I thought did well to improve their value, as well as some of those lesser known names. And they were constantly on the board for a lot of the testing. I've seen quite a bit of Bill Zonin, and you know how much of a big fan of Bill Zonin that I am in terms of his power forward light game. But seeing his testing results, I think that's going to sit well with what they see on ice and how they see or view him here. Even other names like Shane Van Saggy, Carter Klippenstein, those were a lot of other names that tested very, very well throughout the whole entire day. And I wonder now if there's going to be a team that'll take a swing on someone like Van Saggy. Is someone going to select Klippenstein a little bit higher than normal because of how well they tested? Again, maybe the results didn't perform well on the ice where they didn't have the production, but there's more to it than just the numbers. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of skill and a lot of potential to their game, where maybe there's going to be a team that could take a swing on them and select them earlier than expected.
For sure. And that's what the scouting combine does. It puts other guys maybe more on the map than maybe they were before. And you're saying, well, why, how he's doing that? Or, I remember, and I've mentioned this on Prospect Corner before, but Sam Bennett not being able to do a pull-up or whatever, that always came out as something. We all know that's not an issue now. So, I mean, it is interesting to see. Sometimes it does make a big difference. Other times it really doesn't. But it is interesting to see. And speaking of interesting measurements, there's always these ones where you kind of you're seeing maybe a big jump in height or big jump in weight, which, I mean, is not bad. It's more muscle when you're going at it with that. So, Mark, I'll start with you. Anything that really stood out in the measurements from what we saw before the combine to what were in the testing?
So the heights, ultimately, most of them were within an inch or so of what was published. The one that stood out to me, though, is kind of in the other direction, where he was actually a little bit overinflated, both on the height and the weight. It was actually Malcolm Spence. He was listed at 6'2", but he was measured at 6'0.5" and about 7 to 10 pounds lighter. So I'm not sure what that was all about, if he happened to lose some weight, get some muscle, or whatever the situation may be. But that was one that stood out. But then there were several examples of guys where you could easily see where, Horkoff was one. Jackson Smith is almost 200 pounds now. Justin Carbonneau is going to be a first-round pick and might be going the NCAA route. He's up to 205 pounds at 6'1". So there are some guys that you could tell really put in the work, and that might help their stock. And I think the one that I want to call out too, I don't know what your opinion is if you think James Higgins is small. I mean, it's 5'10" and a half and 186. That's not really all that small, considering the height and the weight that combination he's got going on there. So he's going to be a very impactful player, but anybody that thinks that James Higgins is small, try again.
For sure. Andrew, what about you? Anything that you really saw in the fitness or in the measurements that really stood out to you?
Yeah, the guy that stood out for me was Blake Fiddler. Went from 209 to 220. Obviously a big size defenseman, a guy who loves to lay the body. He's got a little bit of that offensive ceiling as well. But yeah, to add that kind of weight pre-combine and then going into the draft, it's certainly going to play well for him. He's kind of some have him in the first round. He's kind of that fringe first round, early second round type of player. But I think to see him kind of get that growth and strength heading into the draft, it's only going to pay dividends for him, on draft day. So I think that was a bonus for him to get that. The nice reading from Mark in his heights and weights, his yearly heights and weights.
For sure. Chris, what about you for ones that stood out in the measurements?
For the ones that stood out for me was really McQueen. He pretty much seemed to crush everything he did within the top 25, eighth in the horizontal jump, almost 21 inch in the vert jump, 9 pull-ups. So he has some upper body strength. On 4.5 seconds in the agility side, he basically hit all of the metrics, especially for somebody coming to the combine with something to prove, with the bad back. So, well, now it's healthy, as he very clearly told us all. So it's that was one that was very interesting to see. Frondell's performance in the VO2 bike test, and showcasing his ability with the endurance test and recovery and whatnot. I thought was really good. It kind of showcases his ability to hopefully stay on the ice. 5-on-5 power play, get as much ice time as you can. So the ability to recover and to test well on that, I thought went pretty well. And then as Schaefer, I know we talked about it at the start here, but I mean, he didn't hurt himself in any of that testing. So I think that kind of helps to secure that what is expected to be that top football.
Sure. And Dayton, what about you for anything that's not been mentioned for interesting measurements that you kind of saw afterwards there?
I always find it interesting when a player jumps up an inch or more. And I found a few guys that did that. Matas Kucharsik, hopefully I said that right. He was up from 6'2" to 6'3.5". So that's a significant jump and puts you into that 6'4" range. That's a big player. And then Hayden Papanekis, he went from 6'4" to 6'5", which also that's another, to me, that's the next tier. A 6'5" player, that is a giant. 6'4", that's a big guy. 6 foot, yeah, is even, I don't know. That's just my perception of it. But yeah, so those were the two that really jumped out to me, of players who are significantly larger than, I guess, advertised. So I'm interested to see if teams will rate them higher then, because we do know that there is a size bias when NHL teams are drafting.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, 6'5" does sound bigger than 6'4", even though, I mean, it's just only 1 inch, but does sound a lot bigger for sure. Peter, to finish it off, anyone you want to shout out as being an interesting development in the measurements?
Yeah, I'm going to be very quick with 3. Carter Miko, I mean, he was at 234, but then dropped down to 232, but still for a defender as mobile as him to still have that, to have that weight and muscle and still be as fluid of a skater as he is, it's still very impressive. Milton Gastrine was at 185, goes up close to 10 pounds, 194, and Theo Staxelius, 183 to 196. This is a player that I really, really liked, especially during that U18 tournament, where maybe if he starts to use his size and strength a little bit more to his advantage, I think there's going to be a lot of teams come calling about that. And hopefully that's a good indication where maybe he can start using that strength a little bit more to his advantage and hopefully get selected a little bit higher up.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things come out of this. I mean, when you're looking at, they're small, but sometimes is a pretty big, significant jump from when they were recorded these measurements before and to now, especially for some of these players are real fitness guys. They're really big with that. So, interesting to see. All right, this question's just for Andrew, Chris, and Mark, because you guys were there and doing interviews and stuff. I'll start with you, Andrew. Quickly, what was your favorite interview that you did? I know you mentioned, Frondell, what he said and all that. Anyone else that was your favorite to kind of talk to?
Yeah, I mean, Schaefer was good. Frondell was good. Simon Wong was good. The favorites. There was, I don't know how many. Honestly, I probably talked to 35, 40 prospects. Trying to think. You know who really stood out for me was Joshua Ravensbergen, and it more tied into the conversation of CHL versus NCAA. Obviously, he hasn't chosen to go that route, but he talked a lot about. One of the questions asked to him was, Canadian goaltending has been hugely disappointing over the last, let's say, decade. The CHL tried to move into, adding only Canadian goaltenders. That really hasn't worked out entirely for them. And so one of the things he said was like the NCAA move offers goaltenders this opportunity to, instead of going from being a 20-year-old and having to go pro and basically your career riding on a 20-year-old pro, you have this opportunity now to go NCAA. And as we all know, goaltenders tend to develop later in their careers. Their primes tend to be in their mid to late 20s. And this offers them that opportunity to kind of do that. And we see that with Jack Ivankovich going to Michigan. We're going to see him kind of develop differently. And I think you're going to see a little bit more of that, goaltenders going the NCAA route, giving them that opportunity. And just the sheer maturity of him to talk about that and realize that, and that being conversation, I think that was, and he seems like such a quiet guy, but once you get him talking, he just, I had to listen back to transcribe that interview, and it was like, it's probably one of my longest interviews because he just kept talking, and it was perfect. It's, I didn't have to ask much, but he just gave me everything I needed. So he's definitely a kid to watch for. I've got him as the top goaltender on my list, and I know Ivankovich thinks he's the best in the draft. It'll be interesting to see how those two play out.
Very impressive for Team Canada throughout every tournament he's been in. He's been really good. So definitely a guy to watch as being maybe one of the first goaltenders off the board for sure. Mark, what about you for a favorite interview? And you can throw in any interesting questions you came across that were asked in the interviews, like the NHL teams asked them.
Yeah, I'll do the questions first, and then I'll name the one guy that I thought was fantastic due to his honesty. But questions-wise, Ottawa, and the head scout did an interview too, and he confirmed that they asked for a joke. So, do you guys have a joke for me?
Not that I can say on air.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a combine question. I think the quote was they went 0 for 59. Like it took them around 60 players before someone could actually come up with a joke like in real time. It was actually quite fascinating to see. The Rangers were presented a 10x10 board of numbers, and they were numbered 1 through 100, but randomly. And so whoever did it from the Rangers called out a number, and the prospect had to find it as quickly as they could. And it's an interesting test, cognitive, how much you process information, things like that. So definitely a little bit different. I know that Montreal asked what animal are you on and off the ice? So those were the 3 most common weird questions that I heard. In terms of the individual player, though, for interview and just the honesty, because teams wanted to know about him, potential first-round pick, Lyndon Lakovic. I'll tell you what, he opened up about he sees a sports psychologist right now because there's a perception of him that he doesn't try all the time. Like he picks and chooses his spots, and teams were really asking him, what is it about that? And, he's seeing a sports psychologist for that, and had some really good quotes about the process behind it, what he's doing to make sure that that's not an issue moving forward. He talked to like 25, 26 teams at the Combine, and it's definitely a first-round possibility, but one that had significant questions around him. But I think that based on his performance, it sounds like that he will lock down a first-round spot.
Yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. And that's again what can come out from the Combine is that changing them. I'm going to ask about that in a minute here too. Chris, finish with you. What was your favorite interview, and any other questions maybe you heard that were asked to the players?
Not really. A lot of those questions were pretty straightforward. So I think Mark hit the nail on the head as far as what we ended up hearing. Jackson Smith corrected a bit of a narrative error in that everyone was like, "Oh, he's committed to Penn State." He has not yet committed to Penn State. I believe from what I saw, he was visiting. Now it's probably well along that way, given what Penn State is drawing up, NIL, all of that stuff. But that was one of those things that he was very clear about. He's like, I haven't committed anywhere yet. So I found that to be very interesting.
That was my question, by the way.
There you go. Mark, by the way, you could tell he's a veteran. The line of questioning from Mark was exquisite. So that impressed the heck out of me. Keyshawn Aitchinson, I thought interviewed fairly well as well. There's no real quotes that stuck out to me, but I remember that. And then for the rest of my life, I've got a photo. I haven't put it out yet. I'll remember the just horde of media around Matthew Schaefer. I got an awesome picture that is just like right behind the Islanders cameraman. So it's just New York Islanders logo, cameraman, and then Schaefer right in front.
Nice.
So it was one of those just cool moments that I happened to see it in time, got my camera, ran back over, got the shot. And that's not what I was there for, but it was a moment of, we had already talked to Schaefer yesterday. He sat down, he gave a bunch of good answers. So it was one of those like, all right, cool. I don't feel like I necessarily needed to interview him there. So it gave me an opportunity to try to look at it from a different perspective. So that was really cool. And then everybody in that top 10, really, I thought just overall interviewed fairly well. I was amazed how many of the guys that we spoke to were naturally like, I'm just a talker. You get me going. And, I enjoy talking to people. So I felt like that was a pretty common theme throughout the draft combine.
Yeah, I mean, with those guys, that I think they're just so used to being interviewed because being those high-end guys, I mean, media is always around them. And you can tell when they get to the NHL, these guys like, Connor Bedard, Connor McDavid, they're all of a sudden that they seem like they're seasoned veterans and with the media. That's because they've been talking to those probably since they were like, what? I want to say maybe 13, 14, because they've been good since then. So, they're on their radar a lot of time for the media for sure. All right, I'll start with you, Dayton, on this. Who did you find, maybe you knew about, but now that you're kind of watching a bit more after the Combine, and maybe no longer flying under the radar for you?
One of the guys we've talked about a few times, William Horkoff. He was maybe not under the radar, but he wasn't, I think, universally accepted to be a first-round pick. He was, some had him up there, some didn't. He had some really good stats, but I think there was, maybe some concerns, questions, whatever it was. I think those are all gone now. He was one of the top performers, if I'm judging the responses of our team who were there at the Combine, and looks to be almost like a lock for the top 32. Mm. Of course, with this group, we can't guarantee anything, but he really doesn't seem like he is, just one of the guys in the later, second round, third round. He is one of the top guys to pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've talked. I think we have talked about him on the show before, but yeah, he's definitely stood out a bit more now after the Combine. So we'll see where he goes if he does end up being a first rounder. Peter, what about you? Apart from Horkoff, who we've talked about a lot here, anyone else that you're kind of watching a bit more now after the Combine?
So this is like one of the predictions that I had going into the Combine, and I still feel strong about this. And it's not so much in, flying under the radar thing, but it's a flying under the radar for the top 10. And I would not be surprised if Kayshawn Aitchison gets into the top 10 somehow because of that menacing and punishing style play that he could play with that physicality. Again, we talk about intangibles and everything like that. Teams are going to want that kind of defender on the back end. They want a guy that could rip the puck as powerful as he can. And again, he's come up with some clutch moments himself down the stretch and in the OHL. And I think he led goaltenders in game-winning and overtime-winning goals. And this is, in a league where you had Sam Dickinson and Zane Parekh just lead the charge offensively among defenders, and he has more game-winning goals than them. So that, to me, is something to keep an eye out for. Again, it was really tough for me because I wasn't there for all the interviews and everything like that, but I still feel strongly that watch out for Kayshawn because he's going to be absolute money for any team that could take him. And if he gets into that top 10, watch out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a guy that I definitely be watching where he goes because I think he will be in definitely the top 15. But yeah, top 10 is maybe a possibility now too. Mark, what about you for anyone that was kind of flying under the radar? We weren't really talking about a lot, but that maybe is a bit more now.
I'm not sure how much under the radar he was. He certainly won't be anymore, but it's Blake Fiddler for me. He found out the number of teams that he spoke to, but just 6'4.5", a right shot defenseman, a shutdown right shot defenseman. You want to talk about rare commodities in today's NHL and an essential part of building a team. That's the kind of guy that you draft. And so I know I found out being at the Combine that the Blue Jackets not only talked to him, but they actually met with him during the season as well, which is it's an interesting. It may lead to something, it might not, but it shows that there's enough interest that they wanted to really learn about this player. So in terms of where he's going to go, it wouldn't surprise me if the Blue Jackets use like their second first round pick, assuming they don't trade the pick, which is 20th overall. Mm-hmm. I think he could be heard within the first 25 names of this draft.
Sure, that is a big thing. Team meeting with them during the season too, which definitely is interested in him and then again at the Combine too. So it's that I think they're interested in him for sure. Yeah. Andrew, what about you for guys that were kind of flying under the radar before that are a bit more maybe in the spotlight right now?
Well, first I'll say, Peter, I knew you were going to go with Kayshawn, and one of the things that stood out for me with him was that one of the first questions he was asked was, what does it feel like when your body hits another body? And he a smile on his face, he said it feels amazing. Yeah. And so, I mean, that to me stood out. I think he's going to definitely move up the board. But two guys for me, Max, I'm going to say this, I'm going to butcher this, but Zanichka, I believe it's Max Zanichka. Right now I have him in the third round. It's it looks Pasenica, but it's Zanichka. I believe it's pronounced,
WHL Portland. Yep.
yes, yeah. So for me, another right-handed defenseman. Right now, I had him going early third round. I feel like he could easily step up into the second round. I think like just the attitude playing in North America. He's talked about the differences between the two, North America versus Europe. He was asked, what do you do better on, bigger ice or smaller ice? He said, I do well on both. This guy's confident. I think that's going to play well for him. I think the interviews probably would have helped him move into the second round. But a guy that really stood out for me was Mason West. And there's a big question mark around Mason West because he wants to stay at Adina High and finish his football career. And it's not just to stick around and play with his friends. The one thing that he said, he wants to stay around because he is the QB. He wants to stay around and learn about being a leader. And I think that's going to play huge for him going into the NHL draft. He is committed to playing hockey. He said, even if schools come out and ask him to come play football, that's not the route he's going to take. He's going to stick to hockey. He's ready to become a one sport player. And I think that's going to play well for him. I had him at the end of the second round. I could see him jumping up into the first maybe 5 to 7 picks of the second round. He's going to be an interesting player to watch.
Yeah, it's pretty cool with him. That's an interesting story with his football career and then kind of switching to hockey. And I mean, multi-sport athletes is pretty awesome, but he will become a one-sport guy. But it is very interesting, his story for sure. Chris, to finish with you, anyone that really stood out is standing out now after the combine?
Yeah, a couple of day two guys, second, third round picks. That I don't know if they're exactly how they're viewed on the NHL scale. The first one was the USHL Rookie of the Year, Riker Lee. Played for Madison Capitals, was the leading rookie scorer, and just overall has just a good game, and he's also young, so there's still room and improvement ability there for him to really go ahead and try to improve that output. And he's going to Michigan State next year, so another high profile player joining that Big Ten, joining that NCAA pool, that in and of itself, I think could be good for his development. So I would expect him to go probably somewhere in that second to third round, depending upon how the NHL scouts and front offices are looking at that. The other one is a goalie we haven't touched on yet. I watched a lot of them during the season last year out of London Knights, Alexei Medvedev. 6'1" goalie out of Russia. Again, kind of goes the gamut from unranked to anywhere up to 44th in the projection. So it should be a good day two pick. He's the heir apparent after Austin Elliott is done now in London. So he's got a starting job in the OHL next year. And I just think he's one of those players. It's always incredibly difficult to project how goalies are gonna play and develop in the NHL, but he's somebody that I thought spoke fairly well the little bit we got the chance to him, and then he was the best goalie as far as the wingspan test. He finished at 8th with a 79.50 wingspan, so always something that is going to be pretty helpful for the goalie to test well in.
Yeah, that's a lot of players to keep an eye on now. And like I say, we've talked about, but not a lot from until now. So yeah, definitely guys to look at. All right, finish the show. Now this question, you can go different directions. You can focus on the team you cover. Anything that we're seeing now after the combine. I know, Mark, you wrote a bit of that after in your notebook afterwards, but any storylines that are coming out after this, going into the draft that came out of the combine? I'll start with you, Mark. What did you find now that everyone should be following this?
Gavin McKenna is going to change the outlook of the NCAA whenever he decides which school to go to. And a lot of rumors around Penn State, and I've seen a couple others thrown around, but it's absolutely premature to say anything definitive right now. But going to be the big storyline is what he ultimately decides to do in terms of what school. I wrote about, like you said, this in the piece. The Blue Jackets had followed Ravensburg throughout the season. Their goalie coach made multiple trips to go see him. So again, that's another little kind of combine tidbit. When you get something like that, that shows interest. Whether it turns into they pick a number or not, completely different stories. It depends if they have the picks or who else is on their list. But the last time that this happened was with Nolan Lalonde, and they ended up signing him as an undrafted free agent. So there's a little pattern there. So it's very possible that Ravensburg could be a first-round goaltender. So that'll definitely be a story to watch. Him or Ivan Kovic. Which one's going to go first?
Yeah.
And then in terms of the teams, watch out for Utah. The whole talk about the combine was they want to make a splash. They got the ownership. They've been building through the draft for a long time. Now they want to advance. Now they want to really welcome themselves to the NHL. So if they could draft a Brady Martin if they keep the pick, or they could really make a huge trade. But every time that I talk to somebody, Utah was always brought up. Might be a mammoth trade if you ask me.
Yeah, that's good. Andrew, what about you for storylines coming out of the combine?
Well, I'm glad Mark touched on McKenna. Obviously, there's Penn State, Michigan State, BU, North Dakota, Michigan. He's going to every school down in the States. The development landscape has changed in junior hockey. It's changed for these young players. We're going to see a lot more of the OHL and the QMJHL go the route of the WHL, let 15-year-olds, or draft at 15 rather, and bring younger players in preparation to get them to go NCAA. And I think that's going to be the focal point moving forward. There's still a lot of loyalty to the CHL teams. A lot of players that want to finish the job that they started with their CHL teams, but there's a lot of players that are looking the NCAA route. It ultimately gives them more power, if they don't sign within that first 3-year window. So that allows the player to have a little bit more of their choice on where they sign. Outside of that, Ravensburgen's going to be first round. I don't think there's any doubt. Kayshawn's going to move up. I don't think there's any doubt. And this is going to be this draft's going to be wild. I think we can predict all we want of what the outcome is going to be for our teams. It's not going to be anywhere close to what we predict. And the Maple Leafs are looking at big defensemen. So 2 years in a row, big defensemen.
There you go. Chris, what about you for storylines coming out of it?
I'm very interested to see how the center situation shakes out at the top of the draft. Coming out of the combine, let me reverse that. Going into the combine, if you would have told Danny Briere and the Flyers organization that they could just sit at 6 and pick James Higgins, they would have told you they were nuts. Coming out of the combine, that's exactly what the situation seems to be, depending upon who you believe. So that I'm just the opinions themselves seem to just swing so wildly that I'm very curious to see how that goes. Plus, there seems to be, I don't know if it's an overcorrection, but the focus on the NHL, especially in the playoffs, is size. The fact of where Higgins measured, as Mark said, he's not exactly small, but it's not going to help his chances of getting picked among guys that compared to him are trees. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. On the Washington front, I'm not entirely sure where they go at 27. They're in a fairly good spot, but they also need to make sure that they're restocking the cupboard for the eventual day that Alex Ovechkin leaves. So I'll be curious to see what they end up doing in that first round spot. But I think the top of the draft is really going to be a very fascinating story.
Yeah, Higgins definitely now is a possibility to be doing that. He's not dropping out of the top 10. That'd be crazy. But, definitely not a for sure top 5 pick when we thought he was going to be first overall pick, which now that's not the case. So we'll see. Dayton, what about you for storylines that are coming out from here? I mean, I don't know. I didn't hear anything about the Senators, but of course you would know more than me. So what what did you find coming out of the combine?
Yeah, for the Senators, they didn't make a lot of definitive statements from what I saw. The big one was they're looking for a competitive player that has high compete, and they're looking for someone who has skill. So that, that's saying a lot and also saying not a lot.
It's a lot of guys like that.
Yeah. They've said that there's one guy that they like, but there's also a bunch of guys that they like. And I think where they're picking, they're going to get somebody that they like. And it seems like they are well prepared to use the pick and use it on a player who can contribute within the next 3 years. That seems to be the game plan. As for other storylines, NCAA, definitely. I've written a couple of articles about that. Maybe more so in the negative. I'm a big junior hockey supporter. I think I think a lot of these players would honestly be better served staying in their junior teams. That might be a little bit more of my personal bias, being a Western-based writer and hockey viewer, if you will. So I'm very interested to see how that all plays out. We're seeing more high-profile guys go and choose that option. We don't know if Jackson Smith is going to go officially. Seems like he's leaning. But Cole Reshny, he's gone. He's going to, I forgot the university right now, but he and, thank you, yes. And his 17-year-old teammate, Verhoff.
Yep.
So he's not eligible until next year, and he's joining him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting development, and honestly puts the Victoria Royals in a really tough situation. So I'm curious to see how that develops. And then I saw a little bit circulating about Ivan Ryabkin and how that he did not test very well, and his interviews did not go very well. And I didn't see any interviews circulating, so this is all just reports that I've seen. But that may hurt his draft stock even more. I'm curious to now see where he ends up. Mm-hmm. He was a first-round pick at one point. Then he was looking like a second-round pick. Is he going to keep falling? Where will he end up? I think some teams might be scared because he did not have a great transition to the USHL. There was some moments that looked great. Will it be enough to make him a top prospect still?
Yeah, that's a guy that's really falling. When he again was a for sure first round pick and maybe even a top 15 pick. So yeah, that's a big thing for sure. All right, Peter, let's round it out. Any other storylines that were coming out of the combine for you?
Just to go back on my loyalty comment about a player saying that he wants to commit to his junior team, and that was Carter Barron. That was our own Mark Scheig who tweeted that out about, Carter Barron being loyal to his junior team. And that's where the whole NCAA CHL thing's coming into play. So again, that's still the biggest storyline. I think, again, Andrew and Dayton have written on that constantly in the great reports by both of them. Utah wanting to make a mammoth move. Sorry, Mark, I wanted to steal that and just feel, funny for a second there. But also the way that, we always thought that maybe Higgins and Martone would battle it out for a third behind Misa and Schaefer. And it seems like a foregone conclusion that it should be those two going 1-2. But after what Mark said about Anton Frondell possibly moving back up, and he's been in that 3 to 5 spot. He fell a little bit further down to 7 for me because I really liked Brady Martin's game. I really liked Desnoyers' game. I still love Frondell, and I still think he could be a top 5 consideration. So the fact now that it's not just Higgins, Martone, and you're probably looking at Frondell, if you're not satisfied with that Bedard Nazar combination, and you can move Nazar to the wing, or you can still do that, bump Oliver Moore up to 2, and then still draft Porter Martone. Who knows? It all depends on what Kyle Davidson's going to do. Again, he's kind of holding all of his cards to his chest right now. As Andrew mentioned before about the Maple Leafs, I kind of feel like they want to go a bigger, stronger direction, whether it's up front. Again, he mentioned that they're going to be looking at a lot of defensemen, and a lot of them that he mentioned kind of fit that build, Jackson Smith, the fact that they talked to them, it still feels like, again, if they could pull off a trade somehow and get into that first round very high, who knows what can happen there. But, he mentioned Carter Amico. I'm a big Carter Amico fan. He was a big riser until, he suffered that season-ending injury, but he tested well. He's back. He's healthy. And the mobility and the physicality that he has is absolutely fantastic. You mentioned Janika, if I said that correctly. Hopefully I said that correctly.
I believe it's Zanichka. Zanichka is how he pronounced it himself. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So, again, competitive two-way defender. Sacha Boumediene, I think he's still kind of like a big X factor in this draft because he's still... he was phenomenal at that U18 tournament. He picked it up in the second half with Boston University. Do teams still view him as that? I know he's got a really strong two-way game. He's got a better puck mobility or offensive game as well. If he's available and he still starts to fall past that, 25 spot and he gets into the second round and the Maple Leafs are going to have a late second round pick, if he's there, it's quite possible they could take him. Mm-hmm. And even overall, too, I know that they want to look at defense. They're very weak on the back end. But, there are other names that really stand out, too. Quinn Beauchene. There's also David Bedkowski. They seem kind of like that prototypical mold that the Maple Leafs want to go down that direction with. Even up front, guys like Theo Saxelius, Matthew Gard, Ethan Zator are some names that I really like that if they tend to stray away from defense and they go forward, I feel like those fit the mold of the direction that they want to go up front. But yeah, it kind of feels like, again, they want to go defense. They want to shore up that back end and worry about the forwards because I think you could find ample forward talent at any point and you could develop them into something big. And those late round picks, I think, are going to be very key for them because if they could hit a home run swing on a potential prospect, that's going to be a big splash for them at this draft.
Matt, real quick before you jump in, you brought up Bedkowski. I'm glad you did because a couple little pieces of news I can share with you guys. One, he told me he's going back to Owen Sound next year. So that's another one that's going to be a CHL kind of thing. But then he actually suffered a little bit of a weird injury that I don't think a lot of people talked about. And he actually had 7 medical interviews on top of the regular interviews. He had a broken big toe outside of hockey. And he's been recovering from that too. So, but he measured out well. Definitely talked to a few teams. That's a good call on your part. But I just want to throw it out there that he's going back to Owen Sound. And I think he mentioned a couple other guys, including the goalie Carter George. They feel like that they can go back and win. So that loyalty thing was a big part of the combine.
Which, that's good sign for the CHL for sure. Not that it's going to all bolt right now, but we'll see how it all plays out. I don't think. Yes, it seems like a lot of these big guys, some of these big names are going to the NCAA. I still think there's going to be a lot of talent left in the CHL. It's not like it's going to be watered down now, but you never know. We'll see how it all plays out now that new rule is in place. Before we finish, I do like that Braden Coots was taken to dinner by the Canucks, which means they're interested in him. And I did a draft target piece on him. I really like him. He's a lot like Bo Horvat, which I don't think the Canucks should have traded in the first place. So maybe they can get another guy like him. Not saying he's going to become what Horvat has become, but he has a lot of the same attributes. So I'm really interested. That's if the Canucks don't trade that pick, which there's been rumors about too. So we'll see. We'll see how that all plays out at the draft. But thanks, Andrew, Mark, Dayton, Peter, Chris, for coming on this mega-sized episode. We usually only have a trio here. But thanks, guys, for coming on and giving your insight from the Scouting Combine. And this is the first time, actually, we've had all 3 writers on the show that were at the Combine. So thanks for making the time and coming on.
Absolutely.
All right. Make sure to check out everything at thehogriders.com. We got lots of coverage on the draft already. We got the draft guide live. It's been live for the last, 3 months now. Lots of great fun stuff there. Tons of profiles. I think we're closing in on 150. We might be there already. Peter can quickly say that if we're
Let me pull up my trusty document right now. We are one shy of 140. But we
Oh,
are
yeah.
still
Cool.
within a good range in terms of prospect profiles getting done.
All right. Well, we will be probably at 150 by the time the draft comes. We got a few more weeks, but it's coming up quick. So make sure to check out everything. We got lots of profiles going. We got features. We got mock drafts. We got, like Dayton said, we got our writer's mock draft coming up. That's going to be out soon. So take a look at that. Lots of fun stuff to read and take in. Lots of videos coming up as well. But until next time, we will see you next time.